I am transitioning into step 5, finally, and been sort of taking some notes today and thinking about it. I have been doing a deep reorganization of my office. So I came upon a lot of items this week, as one does when one digs deeply into their stuff. Among them, like old diaries and pictures and things that were best forgotten. But so it's always interesting. I may have some references from that tonight. But I think that it's certainly, we've given people time to arrive, I think. And I've got 7:04. Some people are having more fun than others. I can see that. And so let's settle in for some meditation. Whatever that might mean for you. Usually involves sitting still. That's what I recommend. Yeah, so settling back into your meditation posture. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. Nothing to see here. And as we start our practice, to take some time to just scan through the body. So just feeling the different sensations in your body and really zeroing in on different sensations, not just skimming over, but what do those different places in your body feel like? And notice how you naturally relax as you come upon parts of the body that are tense or clutched in some way. So this kind of scanning can help us to have a sense of arriving, of just settling a bit. Even in times when we're not terribly active, when we actually stop, typically notice a lot of energy in the body and especially in the mind. So this is one of the reasons we meditate, is to see if we can settle some of this energy. The opening as well to awareness of sound, any sounds in your environment, the sound of my voice, sounds inside your own body. And just another sense, with the sense of touch where we feel the body, and then there's the sense of sound, of hearing, where we hear sounds. This is the simplicity of mindfulness. But we use this simple approach because it tends to calm the mind and body to pay attention to these actual sense experiences. And the mind will tend to keep interrupting. So we have to keep letting go and coming back. With the body, the sounds, and then awareness of mood or mind state, how you're feeling. It's a more subtle experience usually than the other senses. It's not necessarily something that has a name, just the way we're feeling. But very important, really, to tune into this as our mood tends to determine the thought patterns that arise, influences everything we're thinking, everything we say, everything we do. Our addiction itself comes out of an impulse, out of a feeling, a craving. So if we don't stay attuned to our feelings, we just become victims of them, start to be led around by our feelings. And then arriving at the breath, letting the breath become your primary focus. We're not trying to push away the other experiences, body, sound, feeling. But the breath is a convenient concentration object. It's very specific. It's very simple. And it tends to be neutral in terms of how we experience it. It's not particularly pleasant or unpleasant. And again, the attention wanders. It's a natural aspect of mind. It doesn't tend to stay still. Nonetheless, we try to bring a certain amount of persistence, a gentle persistence, to bringing it back. It's not so much that we try to hold the attention on the breath, but rather pay very close attention to the breath, and that will naturally hold the attention. So look very closely. Feel the details, touch of air at the nostrils, or the movement of the belly. Notice where the mind goes when it wanders off. Sometimes it's just random thoughts or memories or plans, calculations, analyses. Sometimes what comes up, what we see, is revealing. It shows us something about ourselves. We don't want to use our practice as a sort of self-therapy, but it is useful, more as a kind of inventory of the mind. Nonetheless, just letting go is always helpful. All right. Nice to see everyone. Friday night. A not inconsequential moment in history. Actually, before I get into material for the evening, one of the things that I came upon while going through my office, because I was trying to clear out some books, as one will do. This is a really wonderful little book of, it's a collection of recovery-oriented haiku called The Breath of Surrender, edited by Robert Epstein. And I actually came upon this some years ago, and when I was editing an issue of Inquiring Mind, we used some of this poetry. But I thought I would read one or two of these just to, for the fun of it tonight. Here's a couple by from anonymous sources. 10 days clean, eating nuts, feeling nuts. That one's, pretty, not much to that one, but it's a good starter. 30 days clean. Somebody told me to bring home flowers for myself. I really like that one. I just think that's super sweet. And this one relates to our moving into step 5. Cold Sunday morning, making a fearless moral inventory full of fear. So, The Breath of Surrender. I don't know if it's really.
Now, what is the book again, Kevin?
Called The Breath of Surrender, a collection of recovery-oriented haiku. Pretty obscure. I wrote a blurb for it though, so So if you write blurbs, you get a copy. Which reminds me, actually, I just got a copy of a book, Yoga in Recovery, I think it's called, which I just wrote a blurb for, and it was actually a really nice book if you're into yoga. I assume if you're here, you're into recovery. So yeah, now that we've more or less wrapped up step 4, hopefully, after 3 months. I spent some time today. I've been looking at step 5 for a while, but I set aside some time today to make notes from my book, From One Breath at a Time, which is ostensibly the sort of guiding text of this class, if you can call it a class. But then I was thinking about the fact that I've never really addressed the language of this step in my writing. I looked at, actually, I didn't look at Burning Desire. I don't know what I said in there, but I'll look at that later. Anyway, I know in the workbook I didn't, and in One Breath at a Time I didn't. So I want to start, because this will be a while that we'll go through this step, and but I want to start by just talking about the language of the step, and when I say this will be a while working this step, it's because I use this step as a opportunity to talk about right speech and everything that can be involved in that, and that's a huge topic and a really important topic. And that, and again, like from the Buddhist viewpoint, recovery viewpoint, and sort of broader implications of it. But step 5 says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And what I think, the 2 words that stand out for me in that step that sort of you kind of want to question or ask questions about are the word God and what it means to admit to God, and then what the exact nature means exactly, if that's not redundant. So, and I've thought about this at different times about what it means to admit to God, and I will admit that um, it mostly, for me, calls to mind, you know, I mean, obviously it's theistic 'cause it's talking about God, but it calls to mind that kind of relationship that one might have if one believed in God, in an external God or a being, or that sort of man with the beard up in the clouds, and that doesn't work for me. I don't believe in that kind of God. So it doesn't mean anything in that regard. I can just sort of dismiss that. I can skip over that. Just move on to admitting to myself and another human being, which is plenty of work. I believe, anybody who's done this step, that's enough, right? Um, but I guess I've tried to maybe dredge up some other meaning that admitting to God could mean, um, that's that's still something about admitting to yourself. Um, that and I guess where I would go with that is kind of thinking about your conscience, you know, uh, rather than just. So I think there's maybe this is, as I say, a distinction without a difference, but the idea of like, okay, I'm admitting it, that's true, I did that, but the conscience is something different, that maybe, the idea that we sort of have some uh, moral barometer in us that knows and that we've done wrong, that we've done harm. Uh, I'm not sure if there's anything in that. Um, might, I might open it up later because I don't know how much I'm going to need to say tonight, but just to hear other people's thoughts on that. And as I say, I don't know if it's important. Admitting to myself, that seems redundant once one has written the inventory. Doesn't that mean I've admitted to myself? But of course, it comes down to admitting to another human being is the big part of this step, clearly. Um, but as I say, I'm just right now just sort of about the language. To then I do think that this uh, admitting the exact nature of our wrongs um, does is kind of a questionable phrase uh, because usually when we talk about the nature of something, we're talking about it in some general terms, sort of the qualities of our wrongs. Like I tended to lie a lot, or I tended to steal a lot, or something like that. But then the term exact, suggests maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe it just really means that I tell someone the exact things that I did. Again, I mean, this is just reflection and on my part to look at that. But I have always thought that that was an important question. What is it that we are meant to admit? Um, so what what it then I guess comes around to is, um, well, what where I see this going is that it isn't so important that you remember every single thing you did, um, because you can't remember it all, right? Especially if you were in a blackout, for instance. But that, and the point of this isn't, the recitation part of this in terms of this and this and this and this and this, not really the point, right? What I'm trying to get at is something more essential about my behavior and who I was and what the nature of my behavior was. So, in a way, I do think that we can get lost in the details and not see the nature of the things and sort of miss the more vital point of the step. Because I don't think that a recitation of everything you did wrong is quite the point. It's this, and so I guess I'll take that back then to the word admitting, which of course shows up in the first step as well. So it's this like a pretty critical word that implies like a full acceptance of something, really taking that in. You know, it's not just, I didn't just tell somebody everything I did. I admitted it. There's a deeper honesty in that that seems essential here. So that's not much to start an evening on. So maybe I will. I had started reading a little bit of the Big Book today. I was going to just show you something that someone gave me some years ago. If you ever become somebody who needs to refer to the Big Book, this thing is really helpful. It's a concordance of the Big Book. So anytime I'm like, where's that phrase? Where's that word? A single word is in here. I think the first, what do they say, 153 pages or whatever it is. So apparently it was given to me by Rodney Clark. It says, please return to Rodney Clark. But I think he gave it to him. I don't think I have to return it to him. Anyway, thank you, Rodney. I should have said Rodney C., I guess, if I'm maintaining it. But it's pretty fun. Because I was trying to think of where a certain phrase was in the Big Book today. But you do have to be pretty, in the weeds to want to get a copy of that. So I will go into one breath at a time here. And read a little bit of the opening to step 5. Step 5 appears to stand in stark contrast to the Buddhist path of meditation. Typically, step 5 involves reading our 4th step inventory to a trusted person, usually a sponsor. While meditation is silent, step 5 is spoken. While meditation is solitary, step 5 is interpersonal. While meditation involves looking at our own minds, step 5 exposes our destructive thoughts and actions to another. The spirit of this step may be what, for me, really separates Buddhism from the recovery movement. It was when I began to reveal myself, both through formal inventory and through informal group sharing, that the healing began for me. And that's, very briefly sums up to me what's so critical and the critical difference between this and between 12 steps and Buddhist practice. And that's a kind of a lot of what I think I talk about in this book, and certainly something that I will touch on in various ways while we get into this step. But I think it also points to sort of a misunderstanding of Buddhism, that Buddhism is about being silent and alone and cutting yourself off from others, um, and that it's only about your mind. You know, all of those things. Uh, None of those things are true. You know, Buddhism isn't about being silent or alone or cut off from others, or just about what goes on in your mind. Um, but it's certainly the way I misunderstood Buddhism when I started to practice, and somewhat the way that Western Buddhism uh, is uh, practiced. You know, if you go to a meditation group, you typically come in and it's so quiet, nobody's talking. And you sit down, and then there's a teacher, and the teacher will talk, and maybe they'll ask for some questions, and maybe as I rarely do in this, I'll sometimes do in this group. And maybe there will be some interaction, but a lot of the time it is very isolating, and you are just looking at your own mind. Um, but when we look at the Dharma, that's not, you know, what it's saying. I mean, the Dharma is, Sangha is one of the three jewels, and the three parts of the Eightfold Path are about action, about behavior. So it's not just internal. So I think it's really important to build on those things, and it's where I think that the 12 steps and what we learn about, particularly about this step, about revealing ourselves, how important that is in any kind of spiritual path. Um, I was uh, looking at something in my workbook about a couple of years ago. I co-taught a 10-day retreat, and I was just more sort of like an assistant teacher with a more senior teacher. And the people who would come to me through the first week of that retreat to have interviews with me would just be asking about their meditation and how to concentrate better, and how to, just all the sort of mechanics of practice and challenges they had meditating. But the last like 2 days, people started to come in and go, "Oh, I have this problem with alcohol." And the other teacher wasn't in recovery, but everybody knew that that was sort of what I did. And then, "Oh, so my wife has this problem. Oh, my son is a heroin addict." I started to get this whole other side of these people who were like, "Oh, I'm just here to meditate and get enlightened." But then they kind of like, when they're getting ready to go back into their lives, it's like, "Oh, there's this guy here. Maybe I could talk about this with him." You know, and I thought it was very revealing, because I think that's sort of emblematic of how Buddhism gets treated. Uh, People go for a retreat, and it's like they're trying to get away from themselves, you know. And you can do that, and that can be very nice, to get away from yourself, or to get very concentrated and have a very deep meditation experience. And that's all valuable, not to dismiss that by any means, but it can leave out huge parts of our story, and the work we need to do. You know, so well, I guess maybe the last thing I'll say is, I said this week I've been cleaning out my office, and I found these folders and old notebooks, and I threw everything out. Well, I saved like the letters from my mother, stuff like that, and pictures. But I had a dozen notebooks with various scribblings in them, the type of things you think you want to save. But I glanced at things, and I would come upon different things, from my 20s and my 30s, and when you get to be a certain age, looking at that stuff is just it's not valuable. I'll say that, it's not something I do enough like going back over my life and correcting it, in my mind. I don't need to read it. But there was this particular, well, the one thing that really struck me, the opening scene in One Breath at a Time, where got drunk at this wedding, sort of, you know, which was my way of kind of making sure people who read the book knew that I was an alcoholic. Like, this is what I did. I went to a wedding. I got drunk because there wasn't any pot, because like if there had been some pot, I wouldn't have had to drink so much, right? It made perfect sense. You know, I was, I think I may have been sort of like thinking I was hitting on the bride. Like, I don't know. There was some conga dance. I just vaguely remember. I got a ride home in from my friend who's also named Kevin Griffin, or his father is named Kevin Griffin. Yeah, this is Kevin Griffin. Yeah, and his brother is named Kevin Griffin. Anyway, they owned a funeral home in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they had provided a limousine for the wedding. It was Will Griffin gave me a ride home. I vomited out the window onto the side of the white limousine, Woke up in the morning, still in my coat, coat and tie, with vomit on. So I threw up in my sleep, which was like, how Jimi Hendrix died. So, I could have been a legend. Only nobody would have known who I was, so it wouldn't have been legendary. But here it is in this notebook where I go, I went to this wedding. It was really fun. I'm like, what? Oh, I got sick after it, the next. I was like, what the hell do you mean it was really fun? That was horrible. Like, it was so just like that way in which I guess they call it denial, I mean, just that and that's the one thing that can be useful about looking at something like that, an old diary, to see how your view of yourself and your life is so different, 40 years later. Like, what the fun? What was I thinking? So that was, and I don't know how I never made amends about that night, about vomiting I never got in touch with the Griffin funeral home to apologize for vomiting on the limo, but, so maybe I should make a note of that. I don't know. I don't even know if that was in my inventory. Anyway, uh, this is just starting step 5, so I'm gonna leave it there. We've got lots more, probably gonna take us a couple months to get, probably, I don't know, maybe not that long. But I do wanna get into a few different, like, mindful speech, areas, maybe even a nonviolent communication, although I don't know anything about that. So, okay, Angela, you want to handle the a nonviolent communication section? Anyway, I'm curious. I mean, I'm happy to hear any comments or questions or whatever reflections people have, but I would be really interested to hear if anybody has any thoughts about the admitting to God, what that might mean to you if you don't believe in God. But anything, we have some time tonight, so I'm opening the floor.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey,
I'll go first. Um, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, and yeah, I'm still the beginning of, I mean, yeah, it's obviously an ongoing process. What God is and all that to me, and like working with my sponsor, and then, getting more into this practice. But she's been having me, I'm back on step 4, and she's been having me, like, she'll mention the God in me when we're doing my inventory. And so when you were talking about admitting to God, I like brought it kind of internal, or like I'm seeing it as kind of like how you mentioned I think it was like another part of self, but
Mhm.
um yeah, and just like perspective, I guess. When you mentioned honesty, that was something else I was thinking, like what is the truth, and like seeing things through, the lens of dharma in this case, and like um yeah, like just kind of going through things and admitting and just seeing clearly, um and admitting that, but just the process, because the way that I do it with her, it's like I'm writing it out and saying it to her, and we're discussing it, and so I don't know, it depends, I guess, maybe on how you do it, but that's just that was the stuff that was coming up for me. So again, like back to perception, which I just have really enjoyed you talking about, but yeah, and the exact nature piece too, like again bringing it back to what the truth is, and yeah, through that lens. So that's what I was thinking about, and it was, yeah, this has been really helpful, so thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's very nice. And you made me think like, I'll let you go in a minute, second, John, that like I always think of like karma as a higher power. So I was thinking, oh, if I admit to my karma that this is my karma, then that, like you said, that's through the lens of dharma, which also, because dharma also means nature, it has the natural law. So that's also another way of thinking about that. John, go ahead.
Uh,
Hi.
yeah, well, I also don't have a belief in God that's outside of me, but God that dwells within me. But also, I never thought of this until just now, but there's a way in which the experience of God manifests between us. And to me, step 5 is about someone who's listening with unconditional love, ideally. Not always possible, but ideally, that there's that experience of being relieved of the burden of these flaws and these defects because someone else has also experienced them and they're receiving that without any judgment, and that experience generates a sense of holding which is bigger than both of us. And I can experience it in meetings sometimes too, when someone's talking and I can really like, my mind stops working and I'm just listening kind of heart to heart, that's an experience of God,
Yeah.
um, that is not outside, but within the interconnectedness. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Beautiful. That's great. It's like the conversation itself, the admitting to the other person creates that God right there in a way. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks, John. Abigail.
Hi, it's Abigail here, an alcoholic. It's an interesting a look at the step, because that thing about God, yes. Luckily, when I did the 4-step, I was not as allergic to God as I became later. So I was able to
Right.
just skim over all of it. But I think what Angela said was exactly what I was thinking, is that somehow being able to see truth was how that's how I would sort of admitting to the truth of it to whoever's listening. And in fact, the first time I did a 4-step, I just wrote about how awful I was and how awful they were. And I read it to somebody and they said, "Oh, that's so good." And I knew that I had not uncovered the truth about anything, but I was given a pass. I didn't stay sober. I don't blame it on anybody, but I did not stay sober.
Mhm.
When I finally learned how to do the 4-step, and finally learned a way to used the 4-step process to arrive at a truth that had been hidden before. And the process that was given to me from somebody through somebody else, it just happened to work really well. Very big book, very much big book, but it happened to work really nicely at clearing away how cute I was. I always I cover up everything with cute and miss the fact that, yeah, it was awful that I threw up on the outside of a limousine. That admission to the truth of it is, I think, what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And when I was finally able to do that, then I was finally able to see how I'm not necessarily yet who I was, but some real patterns of behavior
Right.
that I'd missed before.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jimmy. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
All right.
Yeah, the whole God thing really was a big wall for me. Luckily, I got a sponsor that was what he called himself a former atheist, and it kind of he'd always bring back how Ebby Thatcher would tell Bill to think of his own concept of God. It doesn't have to be a theistic type of God. So I worked a lot with acronyms like, the good orderly direction or great outdoors, and I kind of made up my own, acronym. And but it also in the big book, it talks about the inner resource, God consciousness, that dwells within. So
Yeah.
that kind of helped me get past the whole God thing. And, there's a God within me, this concept of this good orderly direction. It's also without, because if it's in other people, it's around me, so that connection, I think, is important because, I had this romantic idea of, being a hermit type thing. And, if I didn't have to deal with society, everything would be great. But then I got to deal with my own head, and so it's got to integrate somewhere with others. And anyways, I do believe in a higher power. I don't believe, I guess, a theistic man on a cloud type thing, but maybe just the cosmos itself is my higher power. So anyways, thanks for letting me share.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah. I mean, certainly that's one of the things that we get from the program is, as long as you don't think it's you, and recognizing that there are other powers. And it's interesting, going through all the different terms and descriptions of God in the big book, that just a really broad range. I'll say in terms of acronyms, there's also guidance of Dharma. It's one that I didn't.
Nice. I like that one.
Yeah, that's pretty good. There's also get out of Dodge, but I don't know what that has to do with God. But it just came to me just now. I don't know. It was one of my brilliant insights. Yes, I'll have to think about what that could possibly mean. Yeah, Debbie, hi.
Hi, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, sure.
Quick. I don't know if this totally relates or not, because when I came into the rooms the first round, I found freedom in the phrase, a God of my understanding. And even though that gave me freedom, it allowed me to let go what I had been indoctrinated through my childhood as to what that word meant. And even though in those moments I didn't know what it really, how I would define it, I just knew I could trust something that word symbolized, even though I was not going to put it in a box anymore. So I didn't have a hard time with that. I felt when I came to the fifth step, I felt like, well, I had already admitted all this stuff in my fourth step to myself. And I had this thing against confession. I just felt like, why do I have to deal with anyone else about this? It's like, and that partially anchored into my childhood belief as well. And my spiritual belief system, as we grew up, it was like, you just go direct to God. You don't need any intermediaries, right? So why do I have to do that? And then I had been so burned by so many people through gossip and through had been spread about me in high school and things like that. I really bulked at step 5 for that, because I could trust a higher power, whatever that might be. I had admitted to myself, but I had a hard time deciding that I could trust another human being with these deep, dark secrets and not feel like everything was going to be used against me at some point in time. I've gotten over that over the years, but that was my entry point, and I just thought I'd share that because it was just all really raw.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof, I know it is a big deal trusting somebody with those stories, that history. Yeah. I was sometimes when I look at one breath at a time, as I was today, I think, I'm not sure I could have written this today, because I was very honest in that book and revealed a lot that I think there was a way in which, because it was my first book, and as I was writing it, I really didn't think anybody was ever going to read it. You know, I mean, that wasn't exactly a conceptual idea. It just was kind of like, I'm just writing this. I wasn't really thinking, oh, what are people going to think, or like, is this going to how impact? I just wanted to like write the best thing I could write, and it seemed like that needs to be in there, and I need to be really honest if I'm going to. But it didn't occur to me like people are going to know this stuff about me, you know, like, well, that could be kind of creepy, uh, in this era of, you know, everybody knows everything about everybody. It's like, you know, they don't need to like get my laptop and find all my old emails. It's just like right in my book. So fortunately, my father's not running for president, so we're okay. Um, had to bring in something there. So, before we close, I'll just say that I'll be here again on Tuesday morning. I have already voted, as I suspect many of you have. Um, I've been calling people in Pennsylvania, and the only list I think we have now is of people who haven't voted. So there are a lot of people voting on election day. It's going to be an interesting day. And so that'll be, we'll be having a class on Tuesday morning. So if you're at all, feeling the need, come back 10 o'clock Pacific time. So maybe we can dedicate the merit tonight to America. I don't know how you guys grew up or how you felt about America growing up. I grew up feeling very patriotic when I was young, and then becoming really angry with my country during the Vietnam War. And ever since, I guess I've been kind of ambivalent. But these last couple of years have made me really patriotic. Like, I kind of love America, and I hold it really precious. So, in Buddhism, we have this idea of giving merit. It's magical thinking, presumably, um, but it can be good for the heart. So maybe just to imagine, maybe close your eyes for a moment, and what do you think of when you think of America? Do you think of a flag or the Rocky Mountains, or a government or a statue? I don't know, but whatever. See if we can give some love to this country. It needs some love. It really, really needs love right now. Same, may all Americans be free from suffering. And may this country live up to its highest ideals. May we all find connection and community, care, and love. I'll just mention that I recently purchased a copy of the Constitution. I had never read the Constitution. It's interesting. Doesn't say anything about how many Supreme Court justices there are going to be. Just FYI, just fun facts, right? There's a lot of good stuff in there. Anyway, be safe, be well, be really safe right now. Really take care of yourselves. It's still out there. So blessings.